That's fantastic. That's great.
Got to rock it like the mob, and I have my special Friday the 13th cup here.
Mine's a little bit more softcore. It's got a kitten, and it says, "Don't stress me out."
I love that.
So listen, before we get to 1998, which is what we are going to spend most of our time talking about, I keep getting voicemails saying that, hey, do you agree with Jason who wants to trade Aaron Judge? What is this I'm hearing about you want to trade Aaron Judge? Tell me that somebody's misinterpreting this.
For about 6 to 8 months, I said, under one condition do I move Judge. People don't seem to listen. They seem to be tone deaf. I say, if Aaron Judge turns down a big extension, then moving him has to be considered to get value in return. Because other than that, you have two options, right? You either let him walk for nothing, which sucks, or you're going to give him a massive overpay. And I don't care about 2022, 23, 24. I care about 25 to 30. That contract's going to be ugly for the most part, right? That's my biggest fear. So the one thing, and I've been clear about this. I said, if he turns it down, then you have to consider moving him and getting something back. And that's the only condition I've done. But people love to run with this, man. But it is what it is.
I guess he did technically turn it down, but I still think, what's the deadline? It's like June 22nd is the arbitration deadline for him. I think they're going to hammer something out, don't you? I mean, the season he's having, it's going to be hard for the Yankees to not re-sign him.
I think it would be wise to do that, even though he's already said he's not going to renegotiate until the end of the season. I'm taking him at his word, but yeah, like you said, this could be chatter too. My initial range was anywhere from 30 to 35 million per for 7, which is 245. The problem with that, and I think a lot of people are upset that the number that he asked for has been exposed. And I don't know if he leaked it, but whatever. But even at 245, it's 115 million less than what he wants.
Yeah.
That's a lot. That's a huge gap. And I'm not exactly sure filling the gap is going to be that possible, because at the end of the day, I think if Texas gives him 325 million, he's going to Texas.
Yeah.
If Milwaukee gives him that, he's going to Milwaukee. He'll be like, I love the Milwaukee cheese. I love Texas barbecue. You know what I mean? He's going to, at the end of the day, the loyalty is going to be to the money, and it's his right to get paid.
Yeah.
This is one opportunity to cash in, but I'm thinking, extract some value back. If you're not going to go, if you know you're not going to go that high, then get something back for the guy. So
let me ask you this. This is a very unlikely scenario, but it's a non-zero chance. If the Yankees trade for Juan Soto, do they re-sign him? Is it one of those sign and trade type things? And does that mean that Judge is pretty much definitely gone? Because I think if they get Soto, then you let Judge play out this year, you go for it this year, and then you got Soto as your backup. I would rather sign Soto to a long-term contract than Judge. I know that's blasphemy, but he's 23 years old.
Well, I mean, let's just say you give him his last 2 years of ARB, right? And then you give him a 10-year deal for whatever on top of that. He's going to be 34 when the contract ends. That's only going to be 2 years after Judge's contract starts.
Right.
So, and that's like, I look at those timelines too. He's 7 years younger than Judge. That makes a difference. And this isn't Judge's fault. He's a victim of a late service time clock.
Yeah.
Right. These guys start free agency at 26. He's starting at 31. That works against him, unfortunately. Right. And I do see, if the Yankees trade for Soto, they can either ride out with Judge and then try to go for it, or move Judge and try to recoup some of the farm that they just gutted for Soto. So that's the other way of looking at it too. And then it's kind of a salary offset. So it's not going to really damage it. But I could also see the appeal of keeping Judge and Soto and having a historic offense. Like,
oh my God,
he murders road times too.
They've been kind of pacing the 98 team for a while.
Yep.
I don't see it. I mean, aside from putting up some wins early in the season, there's not a lot of parallels. I do think that this team's pitching is probably better than the 98 team's team. But they were both number one in ERA. The 98 team had a 3.82 ERA during the steroid era. Obviously a different time. The Yankees ERA this season has been sub 3 for pretty much the whole season. Again, offense is down, but I thought we could go kind of position by position. I'll take the 2000, or I'll take the maybe the 98 team, and you can maybe compare it to what we're doing with this year's team, and then we can just kind of see who's got the strength. So you want to start at catchers? That makes sense?
Yeah, sure, man. Absolutely.
All right. The catching duo in 98 was a very fresh Jorge Posada, who was, he was another victim of that late service time. He was 27 years old, and this was really his first kind of full campaign. It was 111 games. He was kind of being handed the keys by Joe Girardi, who was the backup. Joe Girardi played in 78 games that year. Right. Combined, they hit about 20 home runs and had about 94 ribbies. It looks like Jorge's on-base percentage was 350. That's real good. And Joe Girardi's was 317. They're obviously, different defensive catchers. Girardi was probably better defensively, but, Posada had a cannon when he first came up. Obviously, that compares much better than the 2022 version.
Yeah, and one other thing that stands out to me, Posada's WAR that year was 3.1. So he had an impact on the outcome of a lot of games, one way or another. And the WAR, obviously, he had a 268 average, and he had 17 home runs that year. So offensively, and this to me, that year is kind of the passing of the torch, in my opinion, from Girardi to Posada, right? Passing the baton, whatever you want to call it. And they made a huge difference. Now, I love what Trevino's doing here. I love it, and on occasion he gets a bop or a double or whatever, and I'll take that offensive thing. But this is one of the areas where it kind of differs from that lineup, because there was not an easy out in that lineup anywhere.
Right.
Anywhere. Right.
We'll get there.
Yeah.
So all right, let's move on to first base. Tino Martinez was the 98 first baseman. And by the way, we're giving the advantage to 98 on the catching position.
Gotcha.
That's kind of a no-brainer, but first base might be a little bit closer. Tino hit 281, 28 home runs, 123 ribbies, only 61 walks, and only 83 strikeouts. So he was the guy who put the ball in play a lot. Defensively, I mean, he's good, but I think Rizzo's probably better defensively. He's got that natural left-handed ability to pick that gives you the advantage on going towards the hole and making the 3-6-3. Who would you take? Tino that year at his age 30 year versus Rizzo this year?
That's a tough one. I mean, that's a really, really close one. I would probably take Tino only because of his tendency to be extremely clutch. That grand slam off Mark Langston in the World Series. He came through when he needed. He also had a 3.3 WAR that year too.
Yep.
Tino. So I would take him by this much. If you could give Rizzo's glove to Tino all day, right? I love what Rizzo's doing right now, but that environment was a little bit different back in the day, and I give Tino the slight edge. And that guy hated to lose more than he loved to win.
Right. And
you could tell he breathed fire all the time. So but Rizzo has those kinds of intangibles too. But I like the fact that Tino played like he was angry every single day, like he wanted to kill somebody every single day.
Yeah, he was very focused. One of the things I loved about him. I'm going to call this one a draw. I think this is a push because on any given day, we saw Rizzo hit 3 home runs. He could save the game with a pick. Tino was the same way, but he would also have his down moments. For his clutch moments in the playoffs, he also had some series where he was, 1 for 20, whatever.
True.
So I think that's a push. How you feeling about it?
Yeah, I would. That's a fair assessment. That's right. That's spot on, actually. Spot on.
All right. Let's go on to Nobby. Chuck Knobloch. He was traded to the Yankees before the 98 season. That was one of Brian Cashman's first move. Eric Milton was a top pitching prospect at that time. He was considered kind of a can't miss. And then he got off to a really good start with the Twins, if you recall. And everybody was saying, what are you doing? Because Knobloch got off to kind of a bad start. Nobby turned it around. Didn't hit for the high average that he had been hitting for, but that year, 265, 361 on base percentage. He hit 17 home runs, 64 ribbies. He had 31 stolen bases, which was half of what he had the previous year.
Yep.
He also got caught 12 times, which is a bit much. Drew 76 walks. He got hit by a ton of pitches, 70 strikeouts, so more walks than strikeouts. And this was a year where his defense was still pretty solid. I mean, he had some initial, a couple of throwing problems, but that didn't really start, I don't think, till 2000 or till 1999.
Yeah.
And when I'm thinking about the second baseman on this team, it's kind of tricky because, we've used Glaber, we've used DJ. So I'm going to use DJ as kind of our super utility guy, kind of like we're going to compare him with Luis Sojo. So let's just compare Knobloch versus Glaber Torres right now. And right now I got to go with Knobloch on that one. What are your thoughts?
I got to give Knobloch the edge too. I mean, he was high volume everything, right? And like you said too, before the yips started happening, or the throwing yips, he was relatively clutch. And he also had a 2.7 WAR that year too. So he made an impact in a lot of different ways too. He had that clutch home run in the playoffs right before Tino's big grand slam. Like he
forgot about that.
Yeah, that was fantastic. And he came through in a lot of moments. And again, I give him the edge over. I give him the edge over Glaber, but not necessarily over DJ.
Mm-hmm.
Only because Glaber's been kind of up and down. When he's great, he's great. When he's down, he's lost.
Yeah.
So, and to me, Knobloch never really offensively looked that lost. Defensively, he did, but he always made up for it with his glove. With his bat. So I give him the slight edge over Torres. And I like what Torres has done this year, but I still worry about him. And to me, there wasn't a hustle issue with Knobloch either.
Yeah.
So, and I still see that on occasion with Glaber.
That's fair. I want to give Glaber the credit where it's due, though. He has gotten better in that department. Like we're seeing him take extra bases, like the play at home the other night where there was a pass ball and he was the trail runner and he forced the issue and scored. We've seen him do that type of thing a couple of times. I've always thought that he's kind of slow for somebody who's his age. I mean, when you're mid-20s, you should be a lot faster. But I think it's just a product of him not going all out, because when he does really run, he can pick him up and put him down.
Yeah, he can put the Jets down. That's right. And he does. And I think it's also a testament to a kind of a different mentality of this team this year, too. I think this is one area where it has a little bit of that 1998 in them, right? This bulldog mentality, this hustle.
Yeah.
Kind of this accountability that they're holding each other under now that they weren't doing before. So that's where it is reminiscent to me of this 98 team. So I got to give him credit for that, too. That's a good point.
That's another good point that you bring up. This is kind of a circle jerk of good points, but when you talk about that 98 team, you can't really talk about them without bringing up the 97 team, which went out kind of early in the playoffs to the Indians. They came into 98 feeling like they had something to prove, like 96 wasn't a fluke. I feel like this team came in this year with all the doubters saying, us saying, hey, we're a third place team. We're worse than the Blue Jays. We're worse than the Rays, maybe the Red Sox. Yeah. And they got off to a good start. But I feel like they still are playing with that mentality of every day they're trying to prove that they belong at the top of the standings, which I think is a good trait to have.
Yeah, you can see that too. And this is one scenario where the Yankees, if an opposing team gets up, the Yankees tie it up. They get up again, they tie it up. They have this Rocky Balboa mentality in them. Right?
Absolutely, hey.
Yeah, I'm going to come back and I'm going to win this game. We'll tie the game. But they keep fighting. And that's one of the things that a great intangible of this team that I love, whether it be Donaldson or Judge, where I have to give him credit, or some of these other folks, they just keep coming after you. So
who strikes me as a fighter, and this is our next comparison, IKF. He strikes me as all heart, baby. And it's a shame that we have to put him up against Derek Jeter, because that's a clear win for the 98 team.
Yeah.
And at this point, the 98 team so far in our 4 comparisons, I think is going to be a clear 3-0 with a draw. Jeter that year hit 324, 384 on base percentage, 203 hits. We never see guys get 200 hits anymore. 19 home runs, 84 ribbies. He swiped 30 bags, and obviously clutch, intangibles, the Jeter factor. IKF, I think, has done a nice job so far. This is a clear win for 98, but let's talk about IKF. What are your thoughts on him so far?
You got to turn me on to him. So we were talking about shortstops early in the offseason. Like, I didn't know much about him, and then I started looking into him, and I realized that a lot of the things he was as advertised, right? Known for his hustle, and he's had a couple of defensive issues and stuff like that. But he's one of the examples of accountability too. He owned up to his baseball mistake immediately and took ownership, and then he came back and made up for it the next day. That's the type of attitude that I think is indicative of the 98 Yankees that's here now. So I love his hustle. I love that he goes out and makes the clutch hit now too. And he doesn't have, like, Jeter had a 6.2 WAR that year in 98, which is crazy. That's Aaron Judge type WAR, right?
Right.
But IKF is going to be making a difference, and he's already put them up ahead tied the games in a lot of situations with his bat. So to me, he's obviously a clear second behind Jeter, but he has a lot of these Jeter type intangibles that he's bringing to this team. And again, one of these underrated guys that not many people wanted because everybody wanted the Yankees to sign the big guy. But I think he's proven a lot of doubters wrong. I really do. And I'm personally, I'm happy we have him. I'm happy we got the guy.
So let's move on to third base. This is another one that I feel like the 98 team has an advantage. Scott Brosius had a career year. He was traded before the season for Kenny Rogers. And I would have literally traded Kenny Rogers for a bag of batting practice baseballs at that point. The guy couldn't handle New York. He actually went on to have a pretty good career after that. Did well with the A's, did well with the Tigers, obviously, and with the Mets. You know, he obviously had some down moments, walked in the winning run and in the playoffs there. You know, hey, it is what it is. Oh, yeah. Glad it didn't happen for us. But, you know, we dealt him and we picked up Scott Brosius, who was coming off a year where he didn't hit for much of a high average. It was one of those first Brian Cashman moves where he bought really low and turned it around, kind of like he did with like Luke Voigt or, you know, some of the more recent vintage deals. Mm-hmm. Brosius that year hit 300, 19 home runs, 98. And a lot of people don't remember he hit ninth pretty much all year. And the fact that he drove in 98 runs from the 9 spot just meant that the Yankees were never out. Like there was no soft spot. He was the guy that was supposed to be the landing spot in there for his defense, possibly a super utility player. Let's talk about Scott Brosius a little bit.
He's one of these guys where people are like, what? Scott Brosius? Why did we get him? Right? It's just nobody wanted the guy. He turned out to be probably the greatest number 9 hitter of all time. Right? Yeah. And he had a 5.0 WAR that year too, 5.0 WAR.
Wow.
And he turned into, look at the clutch home runs he hit in the postseason. Not only that year, obviously the other years too, in 2001 against Diamondbacks, but particularly off of was it Sterling Hitchcock and then Trevor Hoffman in Game 3 of the World Series? So
it was Game 3, but yeah.
Yep. Game 3, that's right. But it's stuff like that, and his defense was solid. He was an underrated. He was the player to be named later in the Kenny Rogers deal, right? And look what he got. And this is an example, and this is where I give Cashman credit for finding, giving away lumps of coal and finding diamonds back. He does this a lot, and I think his offseason trades are probably his strongest suit. And that was his first year as the GM in '98. So finding guys like Scott Brosius was a huge find for him. He played stellar defense. He was a clutch hitter, and he was a perfect veteran complement to the team that they already had, right? And that's it. To me, it was a move of gold for him. So that year, I mean, I have to give the edge to Scott Brosius.
Yeah, over Donaldson.
I like JD, but we're talking Scott Brosius here, so
yeah.
And that's a tough comparison.
Yeah, I think I would take Donaldson's career over Brosius's career, but that one particular year was like, there was something in the water for Brosius. And I think Donaldson's having a nice year. He's playing really good defense. I'm loving what I see from him on defense. It's been a while since we've had this tight of defense, and he's a big reason for it. Cannon over there from third base, but I don't think he's going to put up 5 WAR. He might put up 3, so I just think the advantage goes to 98. Left field is going to be tricky. Let's move on to left field because obviously we have Gallo. So here's the thing though about 98. They didn't really have a steady left fielder. They had Chad Curtis, who's I believe in prison right now. He was a part-time player, 243 average, 10 home runs, 56 ribbies. He's got the bulk of the playing time. He appeared in 151 games, but he also played a lot of center field. He played a little bit of right field. You had Tim Raines, who was mostly, he's a part-time DH, but he would play the outfield a little bit. Future Hall of Famer. He hit 290 with 5 home runs and 47 ribbies. And then you had Strawberry, who, while he was a DH, sometimes was also a left fielder at times. Mm-hmm. I don't consider him a left fielder. I consider him more the DH, and that's what Baseball Reference has him. So we're going to leave him out of the discussion. So we're really saying is Chad Curtis and Tim Raines and Ricky Leday, and then Shane Spencer had that great month where he hit 10 home runs. He finished the year in 27 games. He had 10 home runs and 27 RBIs. He hit 373 with a 1.321 OPS. He was 26 years old. He came up and kind of carried the Yankees in September when they were slumping. So left field is like, I don't even know who to compare Joey Gallo to, but I'm taking the 98 team. I'm taking the whole group of players versus Gallo.
Oh God, yeah. I mean, it's just. Yeah, I mean, honestly, Gallo's almost been 0 for 2022. Like,
yeah,
unfortunately, offensively. So I like when he gets a hold of one because he barrels up really nicely. But you got to take that collection of guys no matter what. I mean, there were so many different pieces that played a different role, and Reigns, Day, Spencer, like. They've all outperformed Gallo. And I honestly, I wish Gallo does. I hope he does well. I hope he turns it around and comes here. And if he stays here, he plays well. But in this particular situation, you can't compare him. It's impossible. Like, you don't give anybody in a 98 team to win. And I would probably hit more foul balls than Joey Gallo. That was a fact. So, yeah.
So, all right, let's move on to center field. This one is Bernie Williams versus Aaron Hicks. This is a matchup of two switch hitters, but I think we know who's, again, getting the judgment here. Bernie Williams that year won the batting title, 339 with a 422 on base percentage. So he was kind of like Aaron Hicks's eye, but a much better hitter too. And he had power. He hit 26 home runs, and he missed a lot of time because he had a knee injury. He had, I believe, a torn meniscus. And missed about 6 weeks. So, I don't really think we need to spend a lot of time on Aaron Hicks. Everybody knows about Aaron Hicks. Bernie is the clear victor there, but I would love to get your thoughts on Bernie Williams.
Bernie Williams, with the exception of not having an arm at all, throwing arm, was a stellar center fielder, stellar defender both ways, going into the right field gap, going into the left field gap, clutch hitter too, very quiet leader. And in that year, too, what is his WAR? 4.9 that year. So he made a difference, too. Everybody on that team made a difference. And again, his ability to hit both sides of the plate and do it in a way that we would love Aaron Hicks to do, but he hasn't been doing is one of the things that really, really gives me the edge over and Bernie. And Bernie complimented his teammates extremely well. And I'm not knocking the fact that Aaron Hicks has drawn, 350 walks this year already, but he's a walking machine. But we need a little bit more offensive production from him, obviously. That wasn't really a worry in the Bernie years. So, and again, that batting title, 339 that year was crazy good.
As a switch hitter,
which is
difficult.
Unheard of. Yeah, that's crazy good. So, I mean, Bernie gets the edge here too. Yeah.
And then right field and DH are two areas where I think the 2022 team might have the advantage. So Paul O'Neill in 98, he was 35 years old, so he was nearing the end of the line. He only had a few more years left to go. He hit 317, though, 24 home runs, 116 ribbies. Just looking at the ribbies total, it tells you everything you need to know about Paul O'Neill. The guy would hit with men on base, 116 ribbies with just 24 home runs is pretty solid. That great on base percentage, he would work a walk. He struck out 100 times that year, 103 times. I was surprised to see that when I went back and looked at the stats because I remember him as a guy who really didn't strike out that much, but he had the second most strikeouts on the team behind Derek Jeter. But I think as we talked about with Aaron Judge, the guy's probably going to win the MVP this year. Let me ask you this. You think Judge has a shot at 60 home runs this year?
At the rate that he has now, yeah. I didn't think he would before. I think he does now.
Yeah, because we haven't even seen the hot weather yet, man. He could have a month and the dead arms in September. He hit 17 home runs in September of 2017.
Oh my God.
17 home runs in a month. Are you kidding me? It would not surprise me if he breaks Roger Maris's single season American League record. I think it goes down this year. What do you think?
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised at all. He's definitely on the pace to do it. And again, his ability to hit in the clutch, just demolish pitching. I do think he's on his way, and probably to 125 RBI.
Yeah.
Also, and a 290 or 280 batting average. He's well on his way. Right now, he's the favorite, in my opinion, for the MVP.
Yeah.
And what's crazy is, he might be on like a Juan Gonzalez pace, like 40 home runs and 100 ribbies by the All-Star break.
That
was completely insane.
Yeah, Gonzalez was an animal, man. Animal.
He was a beast. And what's crazy about when you compare him to the 98 team, there wasn't a guy on the 98 team that had more than 28 home runs that year.
Right.
28 tops. They had 28. We had O'Neill at 24, Bernie at 28, Tino at 28, Darryl Strawberry at 24 and 100 games. So
Let's talk. Let's talk Daryl. So we're at DH. I'm going to give the DH job to Giancarlo Stanton as our primary DH and just compare those two. You know, Strawberry had a good year, 247, 24 home runs, 57 RBIs, and you said 101 games. He was 36 years old, so he was nearing the end of his career. 896 OPS, but I think Giancarlo Stanton is going to crush those numbers this year too. I think he's having his biggest year at Yankee. He just looks more confident, more comfortable. He knows the American League better. He's figured out that he can just miss balls and hit them to right field and pick up home runs. And if you still hang one inside, he'll still take it out to left. So I'm giving the edge in the DH duties to Giancarlo. What do you think? And also better defensive player than Strawberry when you put him out there. So all around Giancarlo versus Strawberry. So I'm giving the 2022 team the edge.
As am I. I think he's also on pace for probably 40, 50 home runs.
Yeah.
It reminds me of Little League Baseball in the way where when I first started, I was afraid to field ground balls. I think Major League players are afraid to field ground balls hit by Stanton because they hit the ball so hard, right? But I always laugh
when they have to pull the infield in like late in the game with Giancarlo. I'm like, don't do it. Don't do it.
Are you nuts?
I would not want to be a third base coach. I was actually in Baltimore a couple of weeks ago, and Trevino was leading off at third base, and Stanton ripped one that almost took his head off. I mean, he ducked by this much. Otherwise, he would have had like a JFK style reaction. All right, let's talk about the bench, because I feel like the bench was somewhere where the 98 team really was different. And the 2022 bench isn't bad, but this 98 team had, Hall of Famer in Tim Raines. You had Joe Girardi, who was a seasoned starting catcher, essentially. Luis Sojo versus DJ LeMahieu. I got to give LeMahieu the edge there. Not really a bench player, but more of our super utility guy. And that's kind of what Sojo was. Sojo only played in 54 games. He was more of a defensive specialist. You also had Chili Davis, didn't play much, but a switch hitter. That's another thing that stands out on this team. Posada, switch hitter. Bernie, switch hitter. Raines, Chili Davis, switch hitters. Dale Swaim didn't play much, but I believe he was a switch hitter as well. Yeah. That's something that the 98 team had that the Yankees of current vintage don't, is just the ability to hit from both sides of the plate. So contrasting that with our bench this year, Marwin Gonzalez, switch hitter, but, more of a defensive guy. Our backup catcher is Trevino. I think he's probably earning more starts here over the next. It wouldn't be surprising if he's getting the majority of the starts by the end of the season, just the way Higgy's played. He looks lost.
Yeah.
In terms of speed, we had Homer Bush. This team has LeCastro. So let me get your thoughts on the bench.
Well, Homer Bush, he batted 380 in 45 games that year.
Yeah.
That was out of worldly. And Ricky Leday, 600 batting average in the World Series.
Yeah.
Bench too. I like the current bench, Tim LeCastro. We have a solid bench, but this bench was special. Every one way or another. And that's the problem. Whether you're righty starter or righty reliever, lefty starter, lefty reliever, you are always going to be stressed on the mound against this bench or the starting lineup. Hands down. Because whether it was Bush, whether it was Spencer, whether it was Strawberry, Raines, Chili, these guys found one way to beat you, another way to beat you, whether it's a walk or a clutch hit, moving guys over. And I'll give it to this team. They're manufacturing runs now, and they're better run prevention now too, this 2022 team. But when you compare it to, and it's really hard to compare. This is almost like the 72 in Chicago Bulls. It's really hard for me to compare any team to it, right?
Right.
And so it's really, really hard, but it's actually a fun thing to do because we do have some similarities this year. Not many, but we have some, right? And so it's kind of fun to compare it to the 98 team. But that I have to give the edge to the 98 bench as well, because, again, with Torres' management and the way that he kind of plug and played some of these guys when he did, he gets the edge managing, and the team gets the edge offensively too. So it's I give him the edge. But I do like this bench. I like LeCastro. I hope he comes back healthy, right? I hope Ender Inciarte maybe gets an opportunity. I hope Marwin Gonzalez gets utilized a little bit more, because I think the more they use him, the more productive he can be.
I want to get to the rotation, the pitching staff, and I feel like we can look at them as a group. I think the 2022 team just statistically has better numbers, but one thing that strikes me about the 98 team is the veterans. Like we had, Wells was 35, Cone was 35, Orlando Hernandez, 32. He had pitched all those years in Cuba. So I feel like they all kind of, they were seasoned and polished and nothing really got under their skin. This year we have a lot of guys who throw a lot harder. Pettit, he didn't have a great year, but, as solid as it gets in the postseason.
Yeah, 16-11 with a 4.24 ERA that year. And again, he was absolute money in the postseason, no matter what year it is. So
yeah,
we have to figure out who's going to be money for us in the postseason. We haven't really seen that yet, right? But Andy Pettit, absolute money. David Wells was 18-4, right? You had Cone 20-7. And I think that was the year where Coney got bit by a dog and then they unveiled El Duque, right?
Yeah, El Duque getting off the boat. He had a really good year. He was 12-4 with a 3.13 ERA. He pitched in 141 innings, 131 strikeouts, 52 walks. Like I remember him being better than those numbers. Like I always thought that he had, more than a strikeout per inning and didn't really walk anybody. But, on second thought, I go back and think about it. And he was one of those guys who was like, he wasn't afraid to walk a guy just to not pitch to him or to walk 2 or 3 guys to pitch to people he knew he could get out. He was just so unafraid. And he was a true, pitcher in every sense of the word. And he kind of borrowed from David Cone in that, like, if let's say you had second and third and a tough hitter at the plate, he would just walk him. He'd rather pitch with the bases loaded because he knew that if he made his pitches, he could get him out. And you talk about postseason performances. He was money against the Indians, and he was money against, I think he pitched pretty well against the Padres in the World Series, right?
He did. And again, that's where he made his money too. That the postseason kind of genius. And he, like Cone, they were very thoughtful pitchers. They could think they were kind of chess players. Well, I can get the guy 2 batters ahead. Like they thought 1 or 2 batters ahead on a regular basis. And I didn't even mention the unheralded guy who was 13-9, Hideki Irabu.
Dude, pitcher of the month in May that year.
Baby.
I used to have a T-shirt that said "Headachy, I rob you." I actually liked Irabu when he first got here. I thought he was going to be a big time pitcher. He was fun to watch. He would smoke cigarettes in the bullpen. Like that's just something you didn't see in America at that point. And that year, 97, that was the year that I moved from New York to North Carolina. And so I missed a lot of his starts, but I, would catch the highlights. And then 98, I was watching every game and he got off to a really hot start, but it was one of those first cases of a Japanese pitcher coming over to America and with the more regular starts, just kind of wearing down. He only made 29 appearances, 28 starts, and he didn't factor into the postseason at all. But Irabu was, like you said, unheralded. Did I say that? Did I put the emphasis on the wrong syllable again? Unheralded. So 4.06 ERA, but for the first half, it was about 1.5. They were talking about him possibly starting the All-Star game, but during the second half, he was terrible. He did throw a shutout that May against the White Sox. I'll never forget. That brought his start to 4-0 with a 1.13 ERA. And on June 10th, he was 6-1 with a 1.59 ERA. But from then on out, it was pretty bad. It was ERA over 5. So, hey.
Yeah, he was tough as nails too. I remember the one game where, and it was a hit-a-thon, and it was maybe the Red Sox. And then he got up the next inning and hit plunk one of the batters.
Oh yeah, started a brawl.
Towards home plate.
Yeah,
oh come on.
That man was fearless. He was out there. He was. I don't even have a superlative. He was a completely unique pitcher.
Yeah.
The bullpen. I feel like the vintage bullpen that we have right now is probably better with the exception of Mariano Rivera. Let's go through some of the names real quick because we only got about 5 minutes left.
Sure.
So Ramiro Mendoza was kind of the unheralded guy, to use that word again. 10-2, 3.25 ERA, 130 innings. He was a swingman. He made 14 starts and appeared in 41 games. To me, Mike King has got a very similar repertoire. They're similar type of pitchers, but I hope that they leave King in the bullpen because I think his best role is exactly what they're doing with him. Bring him in during a tight game once a week, let him pitch 3 innings and shut the other team down. That is a unique characteristic. Alfredo Aceves was like that, and he was super valuable. Ramiro Mendoza was like that. To me, that's the closest comp on this team, King and Mendoza.
100%. 100%. He's lights out when he comes in. They're using him perfectly. And I hope they continue to do that. I mean, I really do. Seves, you have what else? You have Stanton, you have Graham Lloyd, you have Jeff Nelson. Like all these reliable pieces in the bullpen. They're all reminiscent of a lot of guys we have now, right? Clay Holmes, right. Loizaga.
And it wasn't all heat from these guys. It was a mix. Like if you look at, I'll just go through one by one. Ramiro Mendoza was a right-handed sinker baller. Stanton was a guy who threw kind of hard, but he was more like a curveball specialist. Jeff Nelson, obviously a sidearm slider guy with a good two-seamer that he would run either inside on right-handed batters to tie him up, or he would start it off the outside part of the plate and have it do that Greg Maddux thing. And then if you start looking for that, he would throw that sweeping slider and guys just couldn't handle it. Graham Lloyd, he was the situational lefty, 3-0 that year. I remember when they traded for him in 96, everybody gave him a hard time, but he was locked down for 97 and 98. Eventually was traded as part of the David Wells deal, but Graham Lloyd, an underrated part of that team. Australia. Yeah. Good eye, Mike.
Good eye, Mike. Another shrimp on the bobby. Yeah, he was another one. I mean, Stanton reminded me a little bit like Britain, right? That kind of delivery, that kind of move, and Lloyd was unique on his own. On his own self, in his own right. I remember was it 98 where the plunking of Tina Martinez by Armando Benitez? By
Benitez with the brawl with the Orioles, in May of that year. Greatest brawl of all time, in my opinion, that I saw. I'm sure there's been better ones, but I loved that. That was a fun night.
I was at that game.
Oh man, I'm jealous.
At that game when Strawberry came with a right across.
Oh man, the left hook.
Remember Dowson's in front of the game Street Fighter coming from like 11.
Oh yeah.
That's exactly what he did. And that game, he woke up the giant. Graham Lloyd, Jeff Nelson, they all came after him. And that was a game that kind of solidified it all for me. Like, these guys have each other's back, man. These guys have each other back every other way, man. And that was another thing that made the team special, too. But that bullpen, very, very close comparison with the exception of Mariano Rivera, who was the greatest ever. I put him there. To me, it's a draw with the bullpen.
And we're down to about 90 seconds left before the timer runs out. I hate this new Zoom thing, man. I gotta upgrade. Mariano Rivera, I mean, there's no competition between him and Chapman. Rivera, obviously the GOAT. Chapman working his way out of the closer role at this point. I think Clay Holmes might be working his way back in. Yeah. So overall, I got to give the 98 team better offense at large. I think the 2022 team probably has some tougher pitchers to hit, but the 98 team was maybe a little bit more polished, a little bit more veteran. What's your final win total for the 2022 team? I think we're going to 105.
I was just about 100, 203 wins. I see them. I see them all 40 games, about 40 games over. So 102 and 60 or something like that. Whereas before I had them in the mid 90s, I got to give them more wins now. I didn't expect them to start like this. So I'm beefing up their wins. And I think Cashman's going to do something and bring in some reinforcements one way or another to make this team better. Now that, especially Luis Hill and Chad Green, I think he's going to do something. So I don't know what, but I have faith in what Cashman's going to do at this point. So I'm going 102, 103.
All right, Jason, I appreciate it. We are out of time. 161 River Avenue. Appreciate it, Jason.
Thank you.